I approached you to come on the show, and I really wanted a teacher to come on the show, which was really my big pull.
Yep.
And you very graciously agreed to do this, and we kind of were going back and forth about what to really discuss. We've talked about poverty and things like that. So, we'll kind of jump right in. How long have you been a teacher?
This is my 16th year in education, and I have taught in mostly the Kansas City area as well as the Orlando, Florida area in my career.
When you came down to Florida and you started teaching down here, what struck you the most about the student body?
I think what struck me the most about Florida, and again, having grown up myself in Chicago, Illinois, having lived and gone to college in the Midwest for a while, and then coming to Florida, I think I was most shocked by the poverty that students in Florida experience in their homes. And one of the really rude awakenings to me when I first came to Florida was a student who told me that he was living in a hotel, and I didn't understand what he was telling me, and then he explained he had just survived Hurricane Katrina, but his family had lost their home, lost everything, and so they were in a hotel still getting on their feet, getting ready to move into a new house. What I didn't come to realize is as that semester went on, I was meeting more and more students telling me that they lived in hotels with their families, and I instantly jumped to the conclusion that they had also relocated to Florida because of the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, when the fact was that was simply a lifestyle for them, and they had lived in hotels pretty much their entire adolescent lives and had always lived in hotels with their families because of the poverty they've experienced. In my career, I have generally worked at low-income schools, Title I schools, schools in inner cities. When I was becoming a teacher, my professors instilled upon me, you go where the need is. You go where students need good teachers, where they need people who are devoted to them. And I took that to heart, and I've always worked in that type of demographic. But at the same time, Florida was definitely a strange experience in many ways that I was unprepared for.
What would you say is one of the biggest struggles of a low-income student who is living in a hotel?
I think when we think of students going to school, we have a very privileged middle-class version of what that is. And while we make allowances for that, we generally think of a mom and dad and kids in the home, or we can even allow for a single mother raising her kids. But we believe that there's stability, and we believe that there is a sound structure for students going to school, when the reality is we do have so many students living in hotels, as now is being exposed in films like The Florida Project, which is screening throughout the world. We have so many students who are dealing with food insecurities and who are regularly skipping meals because they are not fed weekends or summers or at night when they're not at school receiving subsidized school food. We have students dealing with parents working multiple jobs, students dealing with tremendous poverty that are really struggling. And in many cases, our communities and our schools are not prepared to deal with the systemic problem that is. We estimate right now that about 10 to 20% of students in American schools are homeless, that up to 20% of them are living in poverty, but I don't think we're really addressing that in schools as much as we should be, or in social services as much as we should be, to make sure these students can be successful to get the educations they need.
Are people aware of these numbers, or is it just the spotlight's not? Is the media just not covering it?
I think the information is there, but I don't think it's a glitzy topic that we really want to focus on in reality. We don't want to talk about homeless children. We don't want to talk about students that are hungry and don't have money for food, for clothing, for the things they need. And while we do have many schools that are doing a tremendous job of providing food for students, that have clothing drives for students and get clothing donations, that are able to provide school supplies for students, so many students come to school with such a disadvantage every day in the problems that they deal with in their home lives, that they're not in the frame of mind to put their educations first and make that a priority. And it's unfortunate because you want to see those students on a level playing field and given the opportunities that we try to afford to all children in our school systems.
Absolutely. And as a teacher, you have extra empathy to the students.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you have that connection.
Well, I like to hope I have a connection with all of my students, but as any parent would tell you, your children do not all need the same thing at the same time, and they
Right.
don't need it the same way.
Right.
And the same is true with the 200 students I interact with on a daily basis. Some of them have needs that are much different than others. And I'm fortunate to work in a school and in a community that really works hard to address student needs, whether they are food, clothing, dealing with issues of homelessness or poverty. My school is wonderful in that they are able to even deal with students and their medical challenges and arrange for students to seek the care of doctors and dentists if need be. But certainly all communities are not as well organized and do not have those types of services available. And I'm sure in many communities they believe that they are middle class or upper middle class communities where those services aren't needed, but oftentimes kids are falling through the cracks because they're not aware of those few students who are homeless or are struggling, because it's certainly not something students want to talk about or want to be known.
When you mention low-income students, what demographics are we really facing?
I think that's part of the problem in people not realizing how prevalent these issues are. Is we think there's certain demographics that these situations apply to, but there is no particular race or ethnicity or socioeconomic grouping or area of town or religion that deals with these issues. They are prevalent in every ethnicity, every race, every city and town in America, from large cities to rural areas. So they can affect Caucasian, Black, Asian, Middle Eastern, Hispanic students of all religions, of all demographics, of all socioeconomic backgrounds. Poverty is not a factor that only affects certain types of people.